This painting arrived in the studio yellowed with age, the varnish discoloured, the surface dull and the frame battered from years of neglect. Beneath that layer of grime though, I suspected there was something rather special. Over the next few days I'll clean the painting, strip line and retouch it and carry out research into the sitter and the artist. And as a final touch I'll restore the frame that once again brings this remarkable portrait back to life. Some paintings come into the studio and you just know they're going to clean really well and they're going to be exciting to work on, and this painting was no exception. I think I've had this in the studio since June. We're now in November. It's taken me this long to get to it. So this is the rear of the canvas and our first clue. We've got Bristol there on the background and we've got some chalk lettering as well. The painting has been in this frame for a long time. Everything looks fairly original. The tacking edges look pretty good, but one thing that does concern me is that it's on a strainer rather than a stretcher, so that means there's no wedges in the corner to keep the painting under tension. So that could explain why the painting has got quite a lot of craquelure across the surface. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to remove all these holding pins that are keeping the painting in the frame, get rid of this old picture wire, and we'll get it on the easel and we'll have a look under UV light. Once it's out of the frame you can assess those tacking edges and they look in pretty good condition. It's not been messed about with too much. They do look a little bit dry, they do look a little bit fragile. Some of the tacks are rusted in place, some are not, so that's something to bear in mind. And then under UV light I'm looking for any historical retouching. Now you can see that craquelure all across the painting, probably due to it being on a strainer rather than a stretcher. There's our signature. We've got extensive craquelure there. We've got some quite wide fissures there that have been retouched in there on that blanket, the ceremonial blanket. You'll know what it's called more than I will. And again in here you can see retouching elements in there. The background, again, where the paint's thicker, it's separated, that's been retouched. So when I come to clean this painting, I'm aware that all of those historical retouchings will come off and will need to be put back into place. So with the UV assessment done, I can now get my cleaning solutions and start to test the painting. Now, from what the clients told me, it has been in a smoking household in the past, so there could be an element of nicotine staining or tar deposit build-up from smoking. And my first solution is an aqueous solution that'll test for dirt and nicotine, and it'll come off at a kind of dark, sooty kind of colour. If it's very strong nicotine, it'll come off very yellowed. So there are some elements of dirt in there on the recess edges. So that's the first solution, and you can see that it's already made quite a difference to the painting. Now my next solution is a solvent-based solution, and this is going to test if the varnish will remove. So as the solvent comes into contact with the varnish, it's going to soften it, and then you'll start to see it remove. And this is quite a yellowed brown kind of varnish that's coming off, that's discoloured, possibly a damar varnish, and you can see straight away the difference that's going to come into effect when we clean the majority of this painting. It is so discoloured, it is so yellowed. I'm just going to take that same solution, so I've done my aqueous clean first, and then this is the solvent solution, and you can see as it bites through that varnish, the original colours come through, and this painting is going to be so much brighter. It's going to just really pop when that varnish comes off. Now the things we need to bear in mind are these areas of craquelure. So in his uniform you can see that a painting has maybe been dried too fast, or he's painted too thick over a thin drying film, and that's separated the paint and caused it to crack. And the same here, you can see it's quite extensive, and then someone in the past has retouched those areas in with red paint just to push them back, but it's so widespread. And now these are really small cracks, but if you're at viewing distance, this is going to spoil your enjoyment of the painting. So we will be looking at addressing those as well once the painting's been cleaned. So Before I remove the varnish, I'm going to use my aqueous solution, and you can see the dirt that's coming off already. So I'm going to do a light surface clean. That's going to remove any dirt accumulations across the painting, any nicotine, any soot. And then once I've cleaned that surface of residual dirt, then I'll go in with my solvent and we'll remove that varnish. But it's quite surprising sometimes how much dirt the surface of the painting can hold. At first glance you look at it and it doesn't look too bad, you think it's all varnish, but a lot of it is latent dirt that's just collected over time. So I'll be doing this in sections, surface clean first, and then I'll be coming in with my solvent and we'll show you what it looks like when we remove that varnish from the painting. So we're almost halfway through that first pass varnish removal, and the difference is staggering. That horse's face is just fabulous, I love it, and those colours from the sky are coming through so bright. I'm really looking forward to seeing how this gentleman turns out, but let me tell you a little bit about what I found about the artist and the sitter. This painting dates from the year 1848 and it's signed in the lower right corner, J. Loder, pinx. The pinx is Latin for painted by. At first glance, it's a classic 19th century equestrian portrait, a proud officer on his horse posed against an open landscape, but the deeper we looked, the more the story began to reveal itself. James Loder, sometimes known as Loder of Bath, was a regional artist working across Somerset and Gloucestershire between 1784 and 1860. He specialised in painting horses, hounds and sporting scenes for country estates, hunting groups and the occasional equestrian portrait like this. So it makes perfect sense that a West Country officer, a man proud of his regiment and his mount, would have turned to Loder for such a commission. When we began to study the uniform, we noticed the elaborate gold frogging, the dark blue tunic, and this beautiful crimson saddlecloth edged with gold, featuring a crown cipher. After cross-referencing dozens of 19th century cavalry uniforms, I found an almost identical example in an 1840s print of Captain Sermon of the Royal Gloucestershire Hussars. Every detail matched, from the black plume on his hat to the sabretache, the red bristle tassels, and even the pattern of the saddlecloth itself. That discovery allowed us to confidently identify our sitter as an officer of the Royal Gloucestershire Hussars, yeoman cavalry, painted right at the height of the regiment's splendour. On the reverse of the canvas we found a single word, Gillard. Now this is a surname that does appear throughout Gloucestershire and Somerset, and this could well be an officer who served with the Hussars in 1840s and commissioned Loder to paint him in full dress. We haven't yet found him in the surviving officer rolls, but the regiment's early records are scattered across country archives and museum collections, so that search does continue. I've also gone back to my client to find out if that is the correct spelling of the surname or if further work is needed there. But what we can say for certain is that this is an authentic mid-19th century portrait by James Loder of Bath, signed and dated 1848, showing an officer of the Royal Gloucestershire Hussars. A rare and beautifully preserved image of a volunteer cavalryman at the height of Victorian confidence. So that's the first pass clean done, and the results are just fantastic. The colours that have come through are so vibrant. That red of the blanket on the horse, the hindquarters, it's just fabulous. As we know, that historical retouching is also removed during the process, but we'll be putting that back in, so I'm not too concerned about that at this stage. I'm just really pleased with how the colours have come through, and the blue in that sky, it just really sings now. So what I'm going to do next is a second pass clean. So I've got the painting flat on the bench. I can see different finishes on the paint surface. Sometimes it's glossy and it'll tell me that there's still varnish left on there. You will still sometimes see some little small areas of discoloured varnish that are in the recesses of the canvas. So the UV light can be helpful with this, as it will fluoresce a different colour and it can show me areas that still need further cleaning. So I'm going to do a second pass clean on this painting, make sure there's no sticky varnish residue left. So this is a little bit more gentle, it's a weaker solution, and it's just mopping up in effect really. Just any little bits that are left on there I'm going to now take off. Before I can add the barrier varnish to this painting, I need to address this sagging of the canvas. Now, it's on a traditional strainer, which means there's no keys allowing me to retension this painting. So unfortunately, I'm going to have to strip line this painting just to give it some retensionable support, if you like. If I try and pull this canvas, put it under stress and strain again, there's a good chance that it'll just rip. Those edges, even though they're intact, they're very dry, they're very brittle. So if I got my canvas pliers out and try to re-stretch this canvas, I could get myself into trouble ripping those edges and damaging the canvas. So what I'm going to do is remove it from the stretcher, remove some of these awkward tacks which have rusted into place. I'm just using this slightly blunt chisel just to ease those tack edges out, and then I can just use my pliers to pull them through. Got to be careful not to damage that strip lining edge. Make sure that I don't sever anything. I want to remain and retain those as much as possible. So once I've got all those tacks out, I'll be looking to reinforce those edges with some Belgian grey linen. So with all the tacks out, I can remove the stretcher. See what surprises await me underneath here. See if there's any Christmas tree needles or spiders or the usual fare. It's this bottom edge though that's quite thick, so all the dust and dirt of hundreds of years, 180 years or so, is all caught behind those stretcher bars, and it compounds in there over time. And this was quite thick, a couple of mil thick easily. So I'm just using my vacuum. It's a conservation vacuum that I can adjust the suction on, and I'm just going to remove all that dust and dirt ready for the strip lining process. Before I can apply the new linen, I need to relax those tacking edges. So I'm just applying a little bit of Melanex to the bench, and I'm going to put the painting face down just to protect the surface while I'm working on the back. Just a little bit of moisture here. So this is a cloth with some distilled water, very, very minimal amount. I'm just applying a real small amount of moisture, and that's just going to relax those tacking edges and allow them to lay flat. And once they're nice and flat, I'll be able to then apply my linen strips to strengthen those edges and get it ready to be pulled back under tension. So there's hardly any moisture on there, just enough to relax those fibres in that canvas weave. This is a sheet of quite thick acrylic. It's nice and flat. It's got a little bit of weight to it. And again, this is just going to gently, what's the word I'm looking for, suggest to those tacking edges that they need to lie flat and lie down. So I'll leave this for probably, I don't know, 30 minutes to an hour or so just to relax. And while that's doing its work, I'm just going to prepare those strips for the strip lining process. So with the strip lining complete, I've also used some gummed tape to protect the edges a little bit further. I'm finally ready to add my barrier varnish before I start retouching this painting. So this is a hydrocarbon varnish. It's got really good non-yellowing properties. It's going to protect the paint surface so that any retouching that I do is fully reversible as it's sitting on top of this varnish layer. The varnish that I'm applying will be dry in an hour or so. It'll just give me a really nice finish. It'll saturate those colours so I can match my retouching exactly to the colours that will be the finished varnish layer. And this just allows me to see exactly how this painting is going to turn out now. I always love putting the varnish on after it's been cleaned. The colours get resaturated and it just looks fabulous. You get to really see how this painting was intended. And while that's drying, I'm going to have a look at this frame. Now, this would have been a fabulous swept frame at some point in its history. It has been susceptible to damp though, and I think what's happened is all the decorative elements from that front rail has just popped off, and when these plaster gesso compo frames get damp, that's the worst thing that can happen. It just literally falls off. So the rails are intact, some of the decorative edges on the slip are intact, but I'm going to have to cast those and replace them. This pattern has almost been applied with like plaster, almost like an Artex ceiling. I've chatted to the client. It's historical. It's been like that as long as they can remember, so they're happy to leave it in that state. I'm just going to fill in some of those missing sections and those missing parts, but I'm not going to show you that in this video, as you've seen me restore frames before, and I've got plenty of this kind of work on my Patreon. So here's the finished frame. Rebold the edges, cast all the missing pieces, filled in those gaps, cast the missing rail pieces, and I've recoloured in an antique gold finish, and it looks fabulous and ready to receive the painting when it's finished. Someone recently asked me what my favourite part of restoring a painting was, and I quipped getting paid, which is true of course, but I think the more I think about it, I do really enjoy retouching. I really enjoy matching those colours, and I think it's probably the strongest part of my practice. Cleaning, yes, you can come across things there and things can get in your way a little bit. It's quite tricky, quite difficult. The structural side of things can be rewarding when you've lined a painting or successfully attached some loose or flaking paint, but again, it's not as enjoyable as this. I really do enjoy colour matching and building up those colour profiles to try and hide that restoration as much as possible. So with this craquelure, it's not particularly deep, it's just quite wide. I think James Loder painted quite thin layers, but then he's got excited and put quite thick sections on here on this red, and it's just pulled and contracted, and it's the same with the gentleman. So I imagine he painted that horse probably first, thin layers, then went over quite fat a little bit too soon, and it's pulled and given us these wide fissures. So I'm just pushing them back. They're not deep enough to be filled, and I'm just going to try and make it look more balanced from viewing distance. Certain parts just need a little bit of reinforcement again. This could be from past cleaning, could have worn, so just again little minimal strokes of the retouching pigment here just to hide. I'm just looking at any of those cracks or fissures that spoil your enjoyment of the picture. think by this stage I was probably a good 3 to 4 hours in of retouching, and then this area in the background, it's so fine, the crackler is so fine, and from distance some of them aren't that apparent and you can leave the very, very fine and small ones, but certain ones are a lot wider. The ground layer shows through a lot more, so they do need addressing. So for example, in this section here, I'll do a first coat and try and just get in those cracks. It might be a little bit too light or a little bit too dark. Then as soon as that's dry, I can make adjustments and make those disappear as best as I can. And the same here in this shadow. So the shadow section of this horse is obviously built up layers a little bit too quickly. It's a little bit thicker, and then it's widened the paint. So again, just touching in, pushing those back so that when you view it, it doesn't hit you straight away, and you can make these sections a little bit more solid as well. But he's looking really good. I love the face on that horse. I feel like he's got so much more expression in the horse's face than in the gentleman's. The gentleman's probably a fair representation of the sitter, but in terms of that horse, I just think I feel like I know exactly how it's feeling. There's some real emotion in its face. So I think predominantly Loder was definitely an equestrian artist, and then the portraits were just something he did. He was probably asked to do them, but just the feeling, the depth of feeling in that horse's eye is just fabulous. Just blows me away. That's my favourite part of this whole painting. Okay, so retouching complete and dried. I'm happy with it. From viewing distance, everything is more complete now than it was before, and I've got some fabulous colours coming through. As I just mentioned, the sheen on the horse, the muscle structure, the face is just absolutely fabulous. I really do think he's captured that horse extremely well. And then the detail in the uniform, you know, he's made an effort there to capture every little detail, especially on the horse's blanket. So really pleased with how it's turning out. Before I put it in the frame, I'm just going to apply some of this protective tape. It's like I don't know how you describe it. It's like a foam tape, about 2 or 3 mil thick. It's probably got a name that I could look up. And it's like a cushion tape. It's incredibly difficult to release the release film. But this is just going to sit in the rebate of the frame and offer some protection to that paint surface when it sits in. In the past, people would use velvet strips or really soft material, usually quite thick velvet or felt. But this tape is very good, if a little bit awkward to release. So once I've got this in, the painting will go back in and it'll be ready to be fastened up, and I can reveal the work that we've done. And here he is, complete, back in his frame, good for another 150 to 200 years. He's been fully cleaned. That varnish that was so discoloured and yellowed has removed. It's revealed all this fabulous pageantry. You can see all the muscles in that horse and all that emotion in its face. Just a fabulous painting. I just love the way he's captured that horse. He's got all the details in there for his commission. We're not quite sure who this officer may be, but we've got a few leads. The family frame is intact and complete again. even if it has got its original decorative elements missing. The family decorative method withstands, and yeah, I think he looks fabulous. I'm sure the client will be delighted when they receive it back. So here's the before, very discoloured, very yellowed varnish, nicotine on there. The frame's been battered and then it's had a DIY decoration job applied. And then this is after. Fully cleaned, strip lined, retouched and revarnished, and the frame has also had some work on it to make it complete, and it looks wonderful. So for now we'll leave him here as Mr. Gillard, officer of the Royal Gloucestershire Hussars, painted by James Loder in 1848. A proud figure from a time when local regiments represented not just defence but dignity, pageantry and pride in their community, and perhaps somewhere in Gloucestershire his descendants still ride. Thanks as ever for watching. Thank you to my patrons for supporting the channel, and I'll see you on the next video.